Kelly Riddle, thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
I'm Hal Humphreys, and this is the PI Education Monthly Webinar. This month's theme has been elder abuse and fraud and neglect. And we have been spending the entire month talking about the various ways in which our elder community can be taken advantage of. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Kelly Riddle, good friend, business partner, crazy smart private investigator with a long history as a successful private investigations company owner. Kind of ground rules real quick before we get started. Neither Kelly nor I are attorneys. The things we say here are our opinions. They are not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call your attorney. We're trying to share our experience and our knowledge with the PI community in the hopes that we can all benefit and be better because of it, but we're not offering legal advice. I need to be really clear about that up front. So Kelly Riddle of Kelmar Global, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and all that business, Kelly.
Hey, Hal. It's always good talking to you, my friend. So I was in law enforcement for 7 years, got out of that, and started my PI company. I've had it for 31 years. So I basically have done adult, investigations my entire adult life. And, one of the things that I kind of fell into was nursing home abuse investigations, and I say fell into it because I just had an attorney call me out of the blue and say, "Hey, look, I need you to go interview 20 people." And by the way, I had another investigator attempt to do the same thing, and they got one person to talk to them. So that's kind of what started the ball rolling. I got 18 of the 20 to talk to me and got good statements, and so from that point on, it opened up a whole nother realm for me and kind of a niche.
When was that first call from an attorney to do nursing home cases? How long ago was that?
Oh my, that was probably 18, 19 years ago.
And in the past 18 or 19 years, has anything changed in that world that would increase or decrease business?
Yeah, so, like a lot of things, legislation affected it. And so the tort reform in Texas, where I am, kind of put a stranglehold on attorneys that specialized in that because, the attorneys that I was doing work for, that's all they were doing at the time. And they spent a lot of time, effort, and money into building their cases. And with the tort reform, the majority of them just left Texas and went to greener pastures, And so that kind of changed the whole scope of things. And then we've had some legislation related to whether or not you can put a camera into a nursing home, which has affected things.
And what is that legislation? What is the story behind the cameras in the nursing home? Can you do it? Can you not do it? Are there places where you can? Is it sometimes okay, sometimes not?
Yeah, so now you know who's got the money and who has the lobbyists because the law basically is written so that you cannot put a camera into a nursing home facility, caregiver facility, without first notifying the administration, and the administrators have to give you permission to do so. So, I mean, you can see who was behind that, and it's kind of obvious, but that's a shame. Now, I think it's a misdemeanor. So, if I had a parent in a nursing home and I thought they were being abused, I would probably take the chance, to be perfectly honest. But I can't tell people to do that, knowing that they're going to break the law. But I'm not going to let my, relative get all abused. I mean, that's just me.
So let's talk a little bit about what exactly is elder abuse and elder neglect. Let's address, and I think those are two separate things. Elder abuse. What is kind of the one characteristic about elder abuse that makes it abusive?
Yeah, elder abuse is more of an intentional act, versus the other, which is a culmination of neglect can turn into abuse.
Okay, so when you say an intentional act, somebody specifically does a thing to an elderly person in their care that harms them in some form or fashion, and they do it intentionally.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had, situations where employees have intentionally just sexually molested someone. So that's obviously an intentional act. Or where they intentionally take an elbow and they hit the person in the face with it. Those are intentional acts, and I think anybody can figure out that that would be abuse.
Yeah. And the thing that hits me is we talk about this in terms of, elder care, elder abuse, elder fraud, and it's kind of this unknowable group of older people somewhere out there. This is my mom and my dad. Are your parents still alive, Kelly?
No, both of mine are deceased. I actually had grandparents that were in a nursing home.
Right.
Both of my parents were not.
Okay. I have a friend in Lubbock, Texas. He's a little bit older than I am. His mother is at home. She has home health care coming by. But when we talk about elder care and elder fraud and elder abuse, we're talking about real people's family members. We're talking about our family members. And I think it's important to remember that this is not some, esoteric idea. We're talking about actual human beings who have
Yeah,
value.
that's exactly right. Yeah, you're right, Hal. And I think that's where people lose track of it. It's kind of like insurance fraud. It's like, who cares, because it's a big insurance company, and they got millions of dollars or whatever. So it's the same mentality.
Right. But at the same time, I mean, you add enough fraudulent claims up, and an insurance company could go out of business.
Absolutely.
And the same thing applies here. It's like, these are real human beings in real situations, and as our parents get older and lose their faculties, my father is has always been a strong and powerful, West Tennessee farm boy. He's always been pragmatic and played golf every day of his life. He's now getting up there in age. He doesn't play golf anymore because his shoulders hurt and he's got arthritis. Sure. He's got other health issues. It's difficult watching that process happen, but we all go through it eventually in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
But when I think about this topic of elder abuse and elder neglect and elder fraud, I find it useful to put in my mind my dad as the avatar for that person that's being abused. If somebody laid a hand on my dad,
oh man,
I'd want to hurt them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and rightfully so. I think that's a useful thought process, and because that's how a lot of these people get away with it, is they just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And unfortunately, in this this society that we have, this global, there's people that have relatives on the other side of the world or the other side of the state or even the city. I mean, I live in the 7th largest city, and that's, it can take you an hour and a half to get from one side to the other. So it's not easy to do to get across and check on one of your relatives and stuff. But I think that's a valid point, Hal, that you make, that, we got to put it in perspective.
Yeah. So what are some things that you've seen throughout your history of investigating these things? What are some things you've seen where how people have been taken advantage of or abused? Let's just talk specific stories. Give us some examples.
Yeah, so on a pretty much, you can paint a large stroke with a brush on this, but there's the people that are losing their faculties, who have dementia and Alzheimer's and those kind of things, they almost inevitably are taken advantage of, because they'll say, you don't know whether or not you had that money or you had that clothing or whatever it is. You don't know if you have it or not. And if someone makes a complaint, they'll go, well, they're losing their faculties. What do they know? So that's a ready-made out and excuse for those people that do this type of stuff. But I've seen situations where they take people that are residents in nursing homes and they put them to work. I mean, we had one guy that was actually doing the laundry for the whole facility, and when you talk to him, they said, well, he wanted something to do. Well, number one, the guy is, he could fall and break a hip, or he may want to sleep in that day, but he literally had a job. They just weren't paying him.
That's shocking to me.
Yeah, well, you know how it goes, man. I mean, it's just what the mind can conceive, kind of a scenario. But then you have scenarios where we had one individual who got raped because the nursing home facility was in a kind of a rough part of town. It's an older part of town, and during the winter, a homeless person was trying to get off the street and find some warmth. Well, he found a door that was not locked, and so he wandered in, and before you know it, he was sexually molesting one of the residents. And so you have those kind of scenarios. You have the staff there. We had one facility in San Antonio where after I think they came on at 11 o'clock. Well, by 12:30ish, they were throwing tailgate parties. And so there was like one or two people in the whole facility where everybody else was outside having a tailgate party.
Unbelievable. What are some other ways? We've talked across this past month with various people from the investigative profession and legal profession about different things that can happen. Had a long conversation with Kim Riddle from Indiana about people stealing drugs from older people. Have you seen cases like that?
Absolutely, yeah. I love Kim. She's a great investigator. That's So in a nursing home facility, you have a director of nurses, and they have what they call a med aid, a medication aid, and so it's not uncommon for the nurses to give the medicine to a med aid who is supposed to watch the person take the medicine. Well, the patient's not feeling well, they're asleep, or they're just being cantankerous on that particular day. It's not uncommon for them to pocket that those medicines, and then sell it out on the street. So that's also, fairly regular, unfortunately.
Right. And what are the reasons? What are the stated reasons when someone is caught like physically abusing a patient? What are their reasons? What are their justifications for punching, holding down, hitting? What are the reasons for that? How do they justify that?
Yeah, as you and I both know, there's no good reason, but it's always because the person was fighting them and they were trying to protect themselves, and every time they go into the room to try to help the person, they're combative. And we had one family, and their mother was in the nursing facility, and she started to notice that as a particular CNA, certified nurse's assistant, as that particular CNA would come in, happened to be a male, that her mother, who had had a stroke and was unable to talk, would start drawing up and in a protective mold, environment. And so after the person left, she said, "Mom, answer me by blinking. So 1 is yes and 2 is no." And so, the questions were, has that person, ever been treated you incorrectly? And through that whole process, they were able to figure out that, yes, they in fact were being very rough with them and had been mishandling them. And so, the problem with this is that the elderly don't get the attention that they want. And when they first go into the facility, usually they still have their faculties and they're still where they can get around. So they'll go down and join the others and play cards and eat, their meals with everybody else. But at some point they may become bedridden, and so that's where they start, craving what is natural to, everyone, and that is human contact. So they let themselves, be manipulated a lot of times just because they crave that contact.
Right. Yeah, and I think everybody needs that. And as you get older, and you and I have had this conversation offline a couple of times, but the notion of, like, my parents have plans to go into like an assisted living facility when they are ready to go in, that kind of business. They've got that stuff kind of already worked out, and that's what they want to do.
Sure.
But I have a very dear friend here in Nashville whose mother needed to go into a nursing home facility, and he felt terribly guilty, felt like he was warehousing mom. And I
Yeah.
think some people do that. They put their parents in a facility and then just kind of forget about them. And I think that's one of the things that's one of the devastating things is when you don't go by and check on mom or dad on a regular basis, that's the kind of thing that sets up a situation where they can be taken advantage of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they they know who comes by on a regular basis, and even with the best of intentions, you're going to miss times and miss days and everything else. But we had one family that brought fresh clothing and bed sheets. They brought their own bed sheets and clothing, and they did that on a I think it's every 2 or 3 days. Well, they started figuring out that a lot of their relatives' clothing was being dispersed to other people throughout the whole facility, and we had one situation where one of the CNAs was stealing clothing and taking it home and wearing it themselves, and so for me it was as a teenager growing up, both of my grandparents were in a nursing facility, and my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and so the facility that he was in had a pool table. And I think I told you this offline at one time, where my grandfather went around and started getting all the cue sticks and taking them to his room because, he had his own and he had his name on it. And then he had bought a wheelchair for my grandmother and put her name on it. Well, he started gathering up all the wheelchairs and putting them in his room, so there's some comical things that happen, that you got to look at the lighter side of things. But you're right. Those families that are not able to get in and check on their family members on a regular basis, I mean, unfortunately, those are the ones that are probably going to be targeted.
Right. And my situation is my sister lives in the same hometown where I grew up, and my mom and dad still live in that town. And the onus falls on my sister, unfortunately, to be there and kind of oversee those kinds of things, home health care. I live a couple hours away in Nashville, but if necessary, I can be home in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not comfortable going home to visit my parents right now in person because of this COVID-19 business. The elderly population has been disproportionately hit by the COVID virus. It is, by most accounts, seriously dangerous for elderly people. That's where most of the deaths occur. And one of the things that crosses my mind is I don't want to be the guy that travels back to a small town in Tennessee from Nashville, big town in Tennessee, and carries that virus home and gets my parents sick. What have you noticed, if anything, in the nursing home world with the COVID virus going on?
Well, and I respect that, and I'm glad that that's the mentality that you have, because it really should be respected, for the elderly. But what's occurring, and anyone that's been watching the news can see, is that the nursing homes are where a lot of those people that are being infected with the virus and who are passing away. A lot of them. I think we had one nursing home here in San Antonio, and they had 43 deaths, attributed just to that one nursing home. And they found out that some of the employees had part-time jobs at other nursing homes and a hospital. So, they were just continuing to transmit that because of that proximity and stuff. But I think I told you offline how that another thing that I'm doing is voter fraud. So we're opening up an investigation for a large client, and we're looking at voter fraud across the whole state of Texas. Well, we stumbled into a situation where we have the video. We're in a nursing home. A lady the CNA was handing out ballots. And so this one lady said, well, I want a Republican ballot. And she said, no, you'll take a Democrat ballot and you'll vote the way that I tell you to, or you're not getting fed. So I mean, this is on video, and so those are the kind of things that happen with the elderly. I mean, it's something that goes from that extreme all the way to, they're not getting their turned, and they get bed sores because of it. And then we haven't even talked about, adult day cares, where they go out just for the day.
Right.
Oh, different ball game.
There's there's one of those facilities here in Nashville. It's about 2 miles from my house, down by the Nashville Fairgrounds, and my best friend Jason White and I have joked about it because it's called 50 Forward. And,
oh man!
And we're both 50, and we're like, our wives are going to put us in 50 forward if we're not careful. We have a couple of questions from the crowd. Are you aware of any elder care facilities providing real-time confirmation of services to family caretakers? I'm not sure what they're asking, but do nursing homes provide real-time information about services being provided?
Yeah, they're sporadic though. I mean, that's certainly not the norm within the industry, and I have heard of 3 or 4, and which they're actually it's kind of like a daycare, where parents can look at their kids while they're at daycare or whatever. Well, so they have the same scenario going on, but again, it's only in those generic locations, such as the dining hall or the game room or something like that, because what they have to be cognizant of is that they can't have someone else's relative drifting into the video, so they can't put it in a room where someone else might end up being in the video. So yes, that is a norm. And I've also saw where there's a new company that's coming out, and they're making the inside of the nursing home look like you would be sitting on the front porch of your home. And so it has like a little river running through it, little brook, whatever, and AstroTurf, and so that seems to be the up and coming thing. But the majority of these nursing homes were created, manufactured, built back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're old.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question from my pal Jason Addis. He is out of Waco, Texas. Fantastic investigator in Waco, Texas. He says, Kelly, do these cases require hidden cameras, or do you investigate with interviews?
Yeah, so I know Jason. Jason's a great investigator, and so hidden cameras, I think he must have joined us a little late, because there's a law in the state of Texas where you cannot put a hidden camera in a nursing home without the permission of the nursing home facility. So, usually the cases I've gotten involved in have been kind of after the fact, and I hate to say it this way,
Kelly,
but,
you do know for a fact at this moment Jason Addis is sitting in his office going, "I'm not listening, I'm not listening, I'm not listening," so he can claim ignorance about that law.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, Jason's working on the voter fraud as well, by the way. So he and I cross paths a lot of different things, but there's the problem. You can't just put cameras in willy-nilly in the state of Texas. And on top of that, majority of the cases I've gotten involved has been after the fact, after the person has passed away. And so, if a family member suspects it, what I've told them to do, and I've told a lot of people to do this over the years, my book on nursing home abuse and caregiver investigations, I say, man, just, spend the $12 and go put it on the nightstand beside your parent, because whoever comes in the room is going to see that. Yeah. And so that's going to be kind of an alert, to put them on notice.
Yeah. And Colorado PI asks the same question: address the legalities of installing a hidden camera and who has to authorize it, be a relative or whoever. So we're pretty clear in Texas, the administrator of the facility has to give you permission to put a recording device in the facility. I don't know what the law is in Colorado. To be honest with you, I don't know what the law is in Tennessee. And I would suggest, if you're a private investigator and you're asked to work on one of these kind of cases, talk to your attorney and get a legal opinion about what you can and cannot do with a hidden camera. Now, I could see an attorney making an argument that If the occupant of the room or the family who is paying for the occupant of the room wants to videotape what's going on in the room, and they're willing to give up their expectation of privacy for that, I can see an argument where the caregivers who are coming into the room don't have an expectation of privacy, should not have an expectation of privacy. And I think a good lawyer might make that argument. But in Texas, apparently that you're just precluded outright from doing that without permission from the administrator.
Yes, that's right. That's right, Hal. And, most states don't have that law, but you do have to consider the laws related to privacy, and probably at least 60% of the facilities out there have 2 beds to a room. So again, if you've got the permission of one party, you've got a roommate, now you open up a whole different can of worms. And what happens if, someone from down the hall comes in and visits your relative? Do they get involved in it? So I think you got to be real careful with that. But to answer your question, the question is, yeah, you need to have somebody sign off on it who has the legal guardianship or power of attorney in which to do so. But keeping in mind that you're going to somehow, some way, you're probably going to shoot video of something that you may not have the authority to do. Get somebody in it, basically.
Right. Just kind of thinking out loud through the process. I'm hesitant to even go down this road because, and again, I'm not an attorney. We're not giving legal advice. I am in no way suggesting this is the right thing to do. I am suggesting that I can understand how one might choose to do this. If you put a camera in the room and you caught somebody beating your mother, you would not care whether that was obtained legally or not. And if the court said, well, this isn't, admissible as evidence, I mean, if that were released to the public, the nursing home would be shut down. They'd be canceled.
That's right. Well, the problem with that is where they're going to put them. That's one of my arguments in my book is, and I have found over time, is that this, the nursing homes know that the inspector's coming in. And even in the worst nursing homes, they very seldom shut them down simply because there's nowhere to put them. I mean, most nursing homes have a waiting list already. So if they shut down a facility that's got 100 people in it, where are they going to go? And so that's a dilemma in and of itself. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's other ways to get to that point as well, though. And some of that is you may put the nursing home facility on notice if they're smart at all, but, they're supposed to be weighing the individual on a regular basis, especially if they're bedridden. I mean, because they need to know real quick whether or not there's a change in their weight. So, ask to look at the charts and stuff and see, if they're having their weight done, what their meals look like, are they being fed on a regular basis, and are they getting a supplement like Ensure? And so the problem with meals, when the CNA writes it down, they may say, yeah, they ate 80% or 50% of their meal. That's subjective because what's 50% to me is not 50% to you.
Right. And nobody likes the Jell-O.
I know, isn't that the truth, Lord? And the food's always cold,
yeah.
cold and it's tasteless.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I think, and we're going to get to some more like specific investigative questions here in a minute, but just kind of on, let's zoom back and look at this from 1,000-foot view. Are we as a society at a spot where maybe we just have to say, Mom, Dad, come live in the apartment in our house, or let's, get a family home where Mom and Dad and Hal and his sister Libby all live in the same, 5-acre compound or something. I don't know. I think there's, a lot of the old houses in our neighborhood have mother-in-law apartments, and they are there for that very specific reason of being able to take care of Mom in later years. Now, obviously, if someone is suffering, acute dementia and serious other physical health problems, keeping them at home is probably not an option. But if they're just having trouble getting through the day, should we consider as a society thinking about how do we care for our parents?
I definitely think that needs to be addressed, and I've had friends as well as clients who had to put a GPS on their parents' car because they start getting to a point where my wife's uncle had that. He lived in Cincinnati, and he'd go to the same store he always went to, but on the way home he couldn't remember how to get back.
Yeah.
So now you got those kind of things that have to happen, but it's never an easy thing. My grandfather, eventually after my grandmother passed away, that's exactly what happened because they lived in Amarillo at the time. And so one of our relatives took and built on a mother-in-law's quarters to the house and brought him home. Well, it was an agreement upon all the family members, which would have been, my mother and her siblings, to use the funds that my grandfather had set aside that would be dispersed upon his passing. They agreed to use that money to do that and build onto the house. But for those people that don't have funds to do that, I mean that's a tough situation to be in. But those are the kind of things that we got to breach. Got that conversation.
And the other thing is, even broaching that topic with mom or dad. The first time you bring it up, it's going to result in an argument in which mom or dad says, "You're not going to tell me what to do." It's going to happen.
Like taking their keys away.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about putting a GPS tracker on the car, at what point do you say, you don't need to be driving? I mean,
yeah, that's exactly right.
These are really difficult conversations to have with your family members. And here's the thing. I mean, Kelly, we're both grown men. But when our dad tells us, even if we're grown men, I'm not doing that. I mean, we revert to little boy status, or at least I do, and most of my friends do. It's like our dad is our dad, period, end of sentence. They're hard.
You have to. You got to respect the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even, there's only certain limits that you can do even with a power of attorney. I mean, you still love them and you still want to treat them with respect and dignity and all the things that come with that, So it's hard to watch a family member go into that, and have to battle with those kind of issues, and I happen to be the executor for my parents, so I had the power of attorney and all that stuff that goes with it. And it's a cumbersome issue, because like you were talking about being 2 hours away, my parents lived an hour away, even though I'm in the same town. So you still got to find time to get over there and check on them. And it's tough duty.
And it's a thing that you have to do. I mean, the old joke about, they wiped your butt when you were a baby.
That's it. Exactly right, man. Turnabout fair play,
Yeah, it is. Which is one of the reasons why when I talked to Kim about the fact that we decided not to have children, I'm like, oh boy, we're going to be in trouble in several years.
I know. Not too late to adopt, man. Adopt a 30-year-old,
Jason asks, do the facilities simply turn over the residents' records and medical charts to you during your investigation, or do you have to get a power of attorney or HIPAA release signed first? And I think this not only as investigators, because I think the question is pretty simple for investigators, you have to have a HIPAA release signed. But what about for family members? If mom or dad, if you're checking up on them, how do you get those records in?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so typically, we've always asked the family member, whoever was, usually someone has the power of attorney,
Right.
So we ask that party to go get a copy of everything, and once you do that, you fire the first shot over the bow, and so now they know that something's coming, and so you can never go back. So you got to choose your timing wisely with that. And a lot of times, the attorneys that I work for, as I said, the majority of them were the person's already deceased, so they file a lawsuit right away just so they can have subpoena power,
Right.
And they get employment records, and if the person was in the facility for 2 years or 5 years, they get the employment records, who was worked at that facility during that time frame, because they may work, even though they work, one shift, they could, inevitably switch shifts and everything else. And so what we used that for was to look at the charts, because when a person is taken out of a nursing home and they're rushed to a hospital, they're going to weigh them at the hospital, and so you should be able to look at the charts from the nursing home on the day of or the day before or the week of and say, all right, they're saying that they weighed 120 pounds, but the hospital is saying that they're weighing 89 pounds. So you start looking at that, you start figuring out that people that signed the charts weren't even working on that day, because inevitably what happens is that first shot across the bow, they'll take and start getting the records up to speed. And when something wasn't initialed or somebody didn't sign it, they'll just start putting in people's initials.
So are you saying that these records, if you don't get them soon enough, they can be pencil whipped?
They will be pencil whipped. There's no doubt about that. So every case that I've ever worked, when you ask CNAs, they go, oh yeah, as soon as they got notified about, so-and-so or they passed away or whatever, you saw the DON, and one of the other nurses go in a room, close the door with the charts, and they came out like 3 hours later. And, we had some CNAs that said, look, I left on a Friday, and, when I changed someone's adult diaper, I put the tape on and I initial it like an investigator would, And so when I came back on Monday, my initials were still on that adult diaper, so what does that tell you? Never was changed.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's those kind of things right there. But the records are the key, and I have found double billing where they're billing the family and at the same time turning it into Medicaid, and getting double billing.
And that's straight up fraud. And if you've got the records, you can prove that. Let me ask you this, Kelly. If you get a call from an individual, a person out there in the world who says, my mom is in a nursing home and I think she's being taken advantage of, what is your advice to them as a private investigator, not an attorney? What's your advice to them? What do you tell them they should or should not do?
The first thing I'd tell them to do is start documenting what they're seeing, and part of that is you want to document as much as you can before you fire that first shot across the bow. So start doing your homework. Pay attention. If they've had a stroke, start asking them questions using the one blink, two blink. If not, start looking at what do you take them? Do you take them clothes? What kind of condition are those in? Look at the condition of the room itself and start just, looking at that. There's cliques in nursing homes, so you got to figure out who the cliques are. And if you can figure out who's not in that clique and talk to them, because like you alluded to earlier, people are human, and there's, not everybody that works in a nursing home is bad. So you got to figure out which ones are the good ones, and then, kind of talk to them and embrace them a little bit, and they'll start letting you in on a lot of the secrets, But check to see how many police calls have been there in the last month, last 6 months, whatever, because you're going to find all kinds of police calls that are associated with the facility. How many lawsuits do they have? Do your homework a little bit, ahead of time.
Okay. Are there state agencies that you can contact if you suspect elder abuse or fraud?
Yeah, but again, that's putting the rooster in the hen house kind of a deal, because they are the ones that have to oversee and inspect them. So typically what they'll do is they'll say, hey, we're coming in for an audit or an inspection. Well, they already know they're coming. And so a lot of times they'll have closets with clean sheets and, vases with fake flowers in them, and they'll put all that stuff out. And then as soon as the inspector's gone, they'll, put them back in and use them next time and stuff. So, yes, you can report them. I don't know what good that's going to do, because they're already, if they're a bad facility, they're already on the radar to begin with. Right.
What about people? So we've kind of covered physical abuse, both, violence, sexual violence. We've covered kind of what to do if you notice drugs being gone. And again, I'm assuming the advice would be the same for if you think mom's pills are being taken or dad's hydrocodone is being stolen, start counting the pills.
Yeah, or try to find out when do they give them the pills? And if you're in the town, try to show up and be there during that time frame to make sure that it's actually happening. So there's things like that you can do, but they also just eat the patient's food. I've seen them do that kind of stuff. So how do you know that they're actually getting the nutrients that they're supposed to have? And that comes back down to the weight. Monitor the weight. And my wife has horses, and so a lot of times you can't weigh a horse, but you can put a tape measure around them, and you can measure inches. So kind of do the same thing. Make a joke out of it with your parent or whatever, and just say, hey, I'm just trying to see how much muscle you're building. I know you're getting in and out of bed a lot, so make a joke out of it, and and see if their waistline and stuff is changing, their belly, all that kind of stuff.
The interesting thing to me is, and I'm trying to get around to and I'm thinking of this, and again, I think it's useful to do this as just kind of a mental exercise, but I'm thinking of this in terms of my mom and my dad. If I suspected my mom or dad were being taken advantage of or hurt, I would want to do something about it right this second. But what you're saying is the thing to do is, which is almost always a thing to do, is pay attention, visit more often than you have been, make notes of what the situation is, monitor weight, monitor appearance, monitor attitude, all those things, and just build a record.
Yeah, absolutely. And pay attention. Try to be there to see when different CNAs come in the room, see what the response is from your parent and everything. And, kind of keep a log of that. So-and-so is here on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and someone else is here predominantly, because what they do is they assign a hall to a couple of CNAs, and so once you figure out who is there on a regular basis, then you can figure out who you need to monitor and find out whether or not they've got a reputation or not. So we all assume that the people that work in a nursing home have already had a background check ran on them. So the other thing I advise you to do is, run a criminal history search on the people that are around your parent, because what we consider a background and what they consider a background is two different things.
So if a client came to you or me and said, "Hey, I want you to check on my mom's caregiver," would you suggest that they have a lawyer contact you so you can protect that, or would you just do the background investigation for the individual? How would you approach that?
Yeah, I would first off ask them that question: do you have an attorney, yet? And if they don't, this may be a fishing expedition, and they may be trying to zero in on whether or not there is a problem or not. So I'd probably go ahead and do the background, and depend on what I found. If I found something significant, then I would probably tell them, look, for the work product itself, I would encourage you to get a legal representative, and let me, send that to them so that it's protected under the work product.
Yeah. And just, I know a lot of people, we as private investigators know attorneys. It's just part and parcel of how we do our business. We deal with attorneys on a regular basis. So there's a really good chance that as private investigators, there's an attorney in our life that we could call and say, hey, my mom's being blah, 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 and they would help us out. And probably not charge us just a whole lot. But for the general public, are there attorneys out there or groups of attorneys that will help out someone that is suspecting elder fraud for maybe a discount or pro bono or something like that?
Yeah, so it's like a lot of attorneys, they do things on contingency fees.
Okay.
And so, we've had those that will take them on contingency fees, and not all of them will, but some of them will. And, there are those that specialize in that type of case. And, I know some law firms, they've got floors of attorneys, not just, an office, but floors of attorneys, and that's all they do. But, they also have, medical experts that they call on a regular basis, and the investigators that they call on a regular basis, and they build a case, And that's one reason why some of the attorneys that I was doing work for moved out of Texas, because, they would spend $2 to $5 million in the investigative side of the case. the person's already deceased, of course, but they were getting, jury awards of $15 to $42 million,
Yeah.
and so
And
now
that's no longer.
the tort reform, yeah, so that was the problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've spent basically 3/4 of our hour-long conversation talking about how to help out when we think our parent or an elderly person or a client's elderly person is being abused. There's another side to this business. So in the legal world, there are always, two sides to the coin. Have you ever worked for a facility that has been accused of wrongdoing and investigated on behalf of them?
I have made myself available. I have told facilities that I would come in and to give a seminar, teach them what I do, how I investigate. I have never had any of them take me up on it. Never.
Okay.
And even though I offered it and would do it for free.
Yeah, and you're kind of one of the leading investigators in the country on the topic. You've written the book, you've taught the classes. So do you perceive that? Is your perception that they just don't care?
Yeah, I think there used to be kind of a mom and pop standalone one horse kind of a facility, and now they've kind of gotten gobbled up, and they're all part of a conglomeration, a big business, and so they've got attorneys. It's like that's why we got attorneys. So we're not worried about it. Where our job is to run our business and our staffing and those focus on those things that we do. So it's really a shame, that they don't take advantage of it, because I'd be more than happy to help them, solve the problem.
Yeah. I'm curious about that as a revenue stream. Maybe there would be a way to get in touch with the legal department for a larger company that owns a group of nursing homes and approach them with, hey, we're private investigators. We do this kind of work on a regular basis. We understand that a lot of times, and I'm certain that there are a number of false claims filed against nursing homes where somebody's just pissed off.
Sure.
And nothing actually happened, but the nursing home has to take the time to deal with that thing. So I don't know. Maybe there's an income stream there. Maybe there's not. I just don't know.
Yeah, I've approached some and I said, look, let us do your pre-employments. We do pre-employments for other companies, everything else, and they go, no, the state does it when we license somebody. The state runs their background and stuff. Well, there was a study done by a friend of mine, Mike Coffey. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and through him and the newspaper in Fort Worth, Texas, they revealed that a large portion of the criminal records on the Texas Department of Public website, DPS website, were incomplete or they didn't even exist. It was somewhere between either 33% and 60-something%. And so, because I had them say, well, no, we just go on the DPS website and run a background. Well, it's incomplete and it's not a good background,
I have gotten myself into trouble with some attorney clients in Texas by not going county by county and calling and checking criminal records in Texas specifically. And I say get in trouble. Like I remember specifically one case, we had a witness and I ran a TLO and I went to DPS and I got all the records I could and said, here's this guy's criminal record. And we had missed literally like 15 separate charges that were there at the county level. They just hadn't been reported to DPS, and DPS hadn't reported to TLO or any of the reporting services. So that's a good point. And Cody Pennington says not all facilities do a background check. I'm certain about this, that is true. Not all facilities do a background check. And Kelly, our friend Brian Willingham, that does kind of deep dive due diligence background searches, I know he has some opinions on the background checks that some investigators do that are just like, let's search a database and turn in the information. There's a lot more to a background than just running a name through a database.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you should say that because, I always tell people that's an unverified lead. Anything that you get off the internet, I don't care if it's off a TLO or any other databases, it's
Right.
unverified lead and stuff. But, the flip side of that too is, they're not going to run a background on anybody that they don't have to, because it opens them up for liability. Number one. Number two, they don't have as large of a pool of people to choose from. And, why are they going to run, a background on the janitorials? Individuals, so there's people that operate within that industry, cooks, I bet you they're not running them on them.
Yeah. And all of these people are people that are maybe they're not direct caregivers, but they are in proximity to our loved ones. They are taking care of them in some form or fashion, be it mopping the hallways or cooking the food or disposing of the trash or whatever, but they're in that facility.
Exactly.
And they're around our parents.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, it's an interesting scenario because, anybody that is in it for just the money, which seems to be what most of the nursing homes are in it for, they're going to scrimp and save wherever they can, whether it's background checks or, not providing, enough insure. They're all supposed to have dietitians on staff, and, everyone's supposed to have, a dietary plan and all this kind of stuff. I guarantee you most of them are generic.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no doubt. I've got one more question from the crowd that I think is actually a really good question. We've mentioned several times throughout the hour. One of the things you can do as a family member is visit often. Visit mom or dad every day if you can, at least 2 or 3 times a week, if not, but visit often, pay attention to details. Here's a question from the crowd. A lot of nursing homes right now are not allowing visitors. How do you monitor? How do you pay attention when you can't even get in the facility?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, during this time frame, I've seen where some of them are using kind of a Zoom, or FaceTime, something of that nature. So that's good. You get to have, some time to, talk to them at least. And, I've seen them, if they've got an outside window, I've seen where they go on the outside of the facility and they sit there and, talk through the glass. So there's a lot of opportunities to do that. However, you're in your limitations,
Yeah. Okay. So I would suggest if you have clients that are worried about their parents and in a time of COVID-19 when they're not allowed to visit, I have seen, videos of family members at the window, at the front door, hand on the window, touching, through the window, communicating through the window. I think that's a really good thing to do. Barring that, get on a Zoom conference. All these facilities have the ability to put up a conference like this. Get on a Zoom conference, talk to mom and dad, spend some time with them, some real good quality time where you can see them, you can see their environment, and you can still pay attention to how they look, how they respond to you, their general demeanor. So those are really
One
good
of the important things about that, Hal, that I haven't mentioned is, don't go at the same time every day. Try to go later in the evening after the administrators have already gone home, because it changes, the whole environment changes, the whole personality changes, so make sure you fluctuate when you go, first of all.
We got another question from the field. Kelly, as Hal is getting older and getting more gray in his beard, how should we go about vetting the nursing homes before we put him in one?
Yeah, I know, right? Heaven help the nursing home where Hal goes to,
no doubt. No doubt.
Do the same thing. You don't check them for lawsuits, but you also got to understand, a lot of times they change the name of that nursing home facility intentionally to avoid, looking at them like that. So find out what they used to be named and do a lawsuit search on them, the current one, and then do a check for police calls to that facility, and then check. There's sites out there like healthgrades.com. They actually will tell you what the last inspection score was of that facility, and then contact the Department of Health that regulates them and just see if you can get a copy of their inspections.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the police call sheets will be by address anyway, so the name of the facility is probably not going to matter that much.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. You
All
turn
right.
in
So
the
we're getting,
address and see.
yeah, we're getting right up against the end of the hour. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today. I think this has been a really information-packed and useful webinar. Thanks for being here. I got a note from Stephanie. We're offering a 15% discount off of Kelly's Investigating Nursing Home Abuse course, which is a 6-hour continuing education course on PI education. 15% off. And let's see, is there a discount code for that? I don't see a code. We will post a discount code for that later today. You know what? I'm just going to make Stephanie really angry. And the discount code will be Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y. Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y. We'll get you 15% off of Kelly Riddle's course on investigating nursing home abuse. Stephanie, I apologize for doing that to you, but the discount code is now Kelly for this month. And that'll be good until the end of the month, which is 6/30/2020, or the end of next month. Oh, sorry. I knew by doing that I would get the note. The discount code is Elder Care, ELDERCARE, Elder Care. That's the discount code to get your 15% discount on nursing home abuse, investigating nursing home abuse on continuing education for PI education. I'm Hal Humphreys. Kelly Riddle, thank you again for being here.
Always my pleasure, my friend.